So, Simba, this is the untold story of Raregroove, and me and you, we were rubbing shoulders in the clubs, I think probably as early 85, 86, I would say. Because first of all, I remember knowing your brother first, Samson, and he was working in a basement shop in Soho, in a sex, it was a sex bookshop or a sex video shop or something.
That's right, yeah.
And got talking to him. I mean, I knew him outside that scene as well. And he told me that I could hire out one of his boss's sex club basements for a party. And we named it the basement party. I think it was called, oh no, it was just actually called just the basement. And your brother was rubbing shoulders with people in the sort of Soho underworld at that time. And I was intrigued by the fact that we could get this little club in Soho and hire it for the night. And I think I gave him £200, which he gave to his boss. And we flew it like mad for about 2 weeks. Everybody turned up on this little alley in Soho. And unfortunately, I don't know whether we were ripped off or whatever, but some guy said, no, you can't do it, you can't do it. The police are going to raid it, the police are going to raid it. And everyone had to disperse, never saw my money again. And that was absolutely typical of what went on in those days. And obviously, I knew you as a face on the scene. I knew your brother, and you know, we must have bumped into each other 50 or 60 times. So this is the untold story, and this is going to be your story. So first of all, where did it all start off for you?
It all started off for me as soon as we were allowed to come home from school at the weekends. And we went to a boarding school. We didn't go to school in London. We went to school in Sussex, a grammar school with our grammar boarding house. But when we used to come home for the weekend, our dad would always be out doing something. So we'd always be up to something. And my brother's older than me, so we'll be following him. And he'll be on. We'll come from South London, but we'll be all the way down in West End. And then funny, because we used to spend the whole day in West End, you know, like we used to come back in the night time. So I'm thinking to myself, going around with my brother, there was a time where anything he done, it was just naughty. So we'd get into trouble all the time. And then I came an age where I said, like, I can't wait to leave this guy, you understand? And I found the only way to leave him, or to leave that scene, that football hooligan scene, or that rude boy scene, or whatever scene it was music. And music was a vibration that didn't have trouble, it didn't have aggression. If you wanted aggression in music, you would go and listen to some heavy metal or something. But there's DJs in London, won't able to remember everybody's name, but they used to play some groove, rare groove, different music. You had DJs back in the past like Kenny Dope and people like that. This come from America. But when we found we had British DJs, that's when we lost our mind. Well, I lost my mind over music and DJs. You know, DJs in those times were like on Pirate Station. So Pirate Station was the best, you know. No matter what time of the day, pirate radio station will be bussing the latest, the in tunes, what's going on, information, loads of stuff. So it was about DJs, you understand? DJs were our superstar, you know. And there's a time when I was at college, so we used to go to a club on the weekend, and then music was so good that there was a club every day of the week in West End, from Limelight to WAG to what's it called, Mud Club. There's some names I would love to remember, like Raw and Shaken Finger Pop and Spats. I don't know how much clubs there were, but you remember most of them and make me remember them. But yeah.
So what date are we talking approximately when you found your foot in the London club scene? I don't know.
If you do your maths, it's got to be when I was 14.
So that date is?
You can't say your age now, can you? Like 50-50. No, I can't remember, but say like 86, 87.
Well, this is the era that I'm really interested in because, you know, this for me was the most exciting time in club history. Now, you touched upon music being your sanctuary and coming from this other world.
Yeah.
So give us a glimpse before we get on to the Rare Groove scene and what was happening in the clubs, because of course we call it Rare Groove now, but at the time it was just a melting pot of lots and lots of different clubs.
Yeah.
And the Rare Groove scene came out of that melting pot. So
yeah.
Before we touch upon that, I'd love you to take us through some of the, because as I said, I knew your brother, who seemed to be connected to the darker side of what was going on in Soho and the West End. So first of all, take us through the dark side and then explain how you left that dark side to come into the clubs as your sanctuary, as you called it.
I don't know how to explain the dark side. The best way I can explain it is like, you got an elder brother, he's got to look after you, he's your responsibility, otherwise dad's going to beat him up. But just followed him everywhere really. And, you know, even to, I don't know where, we weren't allowed into pubs. So we had to keep dog for those guys. Like, yeah, they're coming up the road. Somebody would tell them something, and you know, it's always fighting, always getting arrested or running. Running is most of, when I suppose I left my brother firm, so to put it, and he was always at the club. So it's not like you could. I didn't even want to get away from him. It was just a different scene, but the club kind of shaped our personality because, you know, my first cousins, they're ragamuffins. They're into reggae, Saxon and Coxon and bleep, 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 bleep. I like reggae music. I loved reggae music, but this scene over here was new, fresh. You know, you could get a haircut and trim. You didn't even have to have the same hair as everybody else around. You know, it was just something where you can express yourself as your own individual person. You know, okay, I can fight and I'm tough because I've hung around with my brother, but I had a quiff. You know, like, I like to, you know, some people used to start on people with quiffs and end up getting a little box in the eye, or, you know, you couldn't judge a book by its cover. That's what I liked about it as well, because of feeling free.
So you've said, right, so there's one scene, which is the reggae scene, and then there's this alternative scene. So, you know, we now call it Rare Groove, and I mean, I remember the Mud Club before the Rare Groove scene evolved, and you talk about the Mud Club, and we must have rubbed shoulders there too. Yeah. Give us paint a picture, and this is what I ask everyone, paint a picture of what the Mud Club was like, the excitement before you would go there, the people, you know, old friends that you would call up. Take us through a whole evening of going to the Mud Club.
It was this, Mud Club was this place in West End, Tottenham Court Road, and I would try and tell my mates, like, you know, there's nothing to do in South London. Let's go down to West End. Come to the Mud Club. Come to the Mud Club. And it was just this place where they play cool music. But there were trendy people in there. Short hair, tall hair, all kinds of hair. All kinds of different fashion. And I remember, you know, I try and persuade my friends to say, do you know what? You turn your trousers inside out. Turn your trousers inside out and your jacket. What jumper? Swap jumpers with him. You wear her jumper. Swap it back when you get in there. You know, like mix up the clothes, because you couldn't get in there unless you was that quirky, trendy kind of thing. And guess what? At the door, there was a tall, skinny guy dressed as a girl. You understand? Who was the doorkeeper? Would say you could come in or you can't come out. A guy dressed as a girl.
Are you talking about Philip? You're talking about Philip Salon, the host.
No, Philip had another guy there.
Wasn't Tasty Tim, was it?
No, I can't remember the name. Right. But he always used to flirt. We just used to flirt with him because we wanted to get in. Yeah. You understand? As soon as we were in there, It's brilliant, man. There was music. The DJs at the time, all I remember was Mark Moore at the time playing in those. I didn't really, no other DJ stood out as much as he did.
There was Jay Strongman, of course, because it was Mark and Jay that were the two DJs there.
Yeah, I only remember Mark. Anyway, he was friends with my brother as well. My brother's in his video called S Express, but yeah, they were tight. Mark was cool. Inside was just like, downstairs was cool. It's the dance floor in the middle, and you could dance. You know, like you didn't know anyone. You could really freak out in there. You know, we used to see some guys who were, you know, they're supposed to be bad boys from the area in the dance, just popping some spin and some moves. You know, like I swear one had a brooch hair, you know, so I used to think like, you're a real bad boy from South London, you're here at the Mud Club expressing your dance moves. It's kind of like good to see, because I was most probably one of those kind of guys as well, like supposed to be hard and tough, but they're spinning two moves on the dance floor. But I had a good time those times, and they asked me something else.
Well, you've touched upon, you know, this quirky sort of dress code.
Yeah.
Because we can't talk about Rare Groove without talking about door policy in the West End, because of course it was really hard to get into some of these clubs. It was hard to get into the Wag Club. It was hard to get into the Mud Club. You had to look a certain way. In fact, you probably remember a guy called Flowers. The first time I ever met Flowers, he was walking down from the Mud Club. I was going up the road, up Charing Cross Road, to fly the Mud Club to publicise one of my events. I bumped into Flowers and I had to stop in the street because there was this guy walking down the road towards me wearing only a flour sack. I mean, that's how crazy it was in those days, you know. And I've got a feeling that's maybe how Flowers got his name, because he was always wearing a flour sack.
Yeah, I seen him in dungarees, kind of short trousers, but that was fashion, because I remember I was talking to Michael Snaith about that group called Galliano, and they always used to dress funky. You understand that? Was that after that time, or we're talking before that time? Because fashion, you would talk to more people who was wearing monkey boots than trainers. This was kind of like, I don't know if they called us, you know, nerds, but we weren't really nerds. We just know that we were a bit different.
So that was the time for me, the kind of the melting pot time. Yeah. Then it started to specialise in what I call the slightly more funky, the James Brown sound, and you know, that's the music that inspired me at places like the Wag, hearing, you know, Grover Washington, like a funky Grover Washington track next to a James Brown track, next to a very, very funky soul track. So for me, that's where it all kind of started. But is there a point where you remember that, where you feel that kind of Rare Groove was born? Or the sound that we know today, where all the Rare Groove classics have come from?
But half of those clubs in West End used to play some Rare Groove, but as well as the commercial stuff. But when it came down to a Rare Groove night, that was kind of like Africa Centre.
So was Africa Centre for you the first place where you remember hearing that music? I mean, there are other clubs that everyone else refers to. I'm just interested, obviously, in your story. I think it's more
Africa Centre, yeah. Because we used to listen to LWR, and we used to hear stuff. There's a tape behind you right now with Jazzy B on there, on LWR, and he's playing Turn Off the Lights and stuff like that, and that there was kind of like, even the music, because the keyboard player used to go off on one, or somebody was going off on one, and you just danced to it. It was about a 10-minute song or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's an absolute Africa Centre classic. It's still in my play-out box today. I played it at the last Rare Groove party that we did, you know, this last February. So Well, do you remember how you heard about the Africa Centre?
Right, let me think. That's a big question, that one. I think we always had our ear to the ground, and I think we were at college as well. So we were like, somebody would mention something, but there was a time when I used to go to Africa Centre religiously. It was like, so some of the memories are just meeting people and just having a really good time and hearing good music. I'd be in there and I'd just be like, might approach somebody and say, just ask them a question, and some dread will spin in a dance and just wetted me up in the side of my face, like, Jesus. So I don't know, there's loads of experiences, but the one you're trying to get, I think it's Africa Centre that set off the mood, because I even wasn't frightened to be coming out my house dressed in some, not flares, but kind of like, they were just like wider trousers than I would be usually wearing, you know what I mean? Like, because I was always grown up on skinny jeans or stay press. But let me think now. But other clubs, say you was at that club like Opera House, yeah, it still had funky music in there, but when we used to go to Opera House, it was in a theatre, like Piccadilly Theatre. That
was Philip Salon's club after the Mud Club.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was a little tiny bit later.
Okay.
Returning to the Africa Centre, for those who weren't there, I mean, for me, obviously, you know, I was promoting it, DJing, and living it that way. But for you, obviously, coming into the dance and everything.
Coming into the dance, we didn't even know you was involved in it. The only time, and I don't know how long we've been going there for, till I realised, I think you've done some artwork for, you were the one doing all the artwork. In fact, made Jazzy B noticeable. You know what I mean? So it was people like you that helped Jazzy B. Because I got a funk pass. We can see it later on. But
you've got the original Africa Centre funk pass. We must get that out if you've got it in storage somewhere.
Yeah. It's just over there behind you. And then there's some other passes and some other things. So I always made sure I had a membership card, because there was a time where we couldn't get into the clubs. But if you had a membership card, you're like...
Well, if you had the funk pass, you must have actually come probably on the first 2 or 3 nights, because what I did is I designed the underground funk pass. It looked like the 2-zone travel card at the time, and instead of zone 1 and 2, we had zone Wicked Pulse, which obviously that was my sound with Andy Shaft, and then zone 2 I designed it so it said soul, and then the 2 of the zone was soul to soul.
Oh, yeah.
And then that was the underground funk pass. Everyone who came actually had to sign a piece of paper in blue ink, and then I would take them back. I'd cut up the photocopies and then actually bring them back the next week and tell people to pick up their funk pass the next week. So you must have actually come down on the first...
Do you know what? Because my brother was mates with you all and stuff like that, I used to get mine.
Oh, it was through your brother.
I might have got it through him, or I got one on the swing. I think I signed for a couple of passes, but they spelt my name wrong, like Gordon or Simba. You know what I'm saying?
Well, on our pass, you actually had to sign the piece of paper yourself, so that guaranteed that we got the correct name.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll splash up if we can find it. We'll splash that up at the end of the interview. Yeah. So, describe the atmosphere coming into the club, the excitement of going there. What, you know, the feeling, the music, everything that made the Africa Centre special for you.
So you know what? Going into the Africa Centre from the door, you know, and after queuing up, or there'll be a kind of short queue or queue. The first time I beg I can get into this place. I beg you I can get in through the door. I just don't want to be out here in the cold or whatever it was. But there were people outside, because there's a gathering outside of people who love to talk. And they were communicating outside and doing business, like, you know. But get into the place. When you get into the place, have you seen that film Belly with DMX?
No.
And Nas. The way they walk into the club and they're playing that soul to soul tune, it's just like that, you know. You go in there, you know, you could smoke in the clubs them times. You couldn't cut the knife through the smoke, but everybody was, you see, teeth here, teeth there, dreads hair, curly hair there, short hair there, perm over there. And you see cool people, cool clothes, Black James Deans, I don't know. They were just cool, you understand? And everybody was happy, you understand? Everybody, I've never seen any trouble there. I've seen my brother he had the odd stare with a couple of rude boys who came there and stuff like that. Like Jumping Jack Frost was a rude boy. He was a bad boy before you know him as Jumping Jack Frost, the DJ. But DJ saved our lives. But what should you say? Used to walk in there. The bar was at the back. You know. You know what it's about? £1 or £2 for a drink.
Well, it was actually Jazzy's. I think it was Jazzy's brothers who were running the bar. And they just used to turn up half an hour before with a van full of drink, because at that time, obviously licensing laws were in place, but because it was a Sunday night, there was nobody around in the West End. I mean, that was the remarkable thing about the Africa Centre, is, you know, 600 to 700 people would turn up every Sunday to the West End when it was completely and utterly dead.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was Jazzy's brothers who were selling the booze in the back room.
Jazzy, I remember Jazzy saying, "Don't do your washing out there, do your washing over there." You know, to people who had like little tensions in the place. So he was a proper controller. You understand? He was a proper on his game, man. Well, he looked like he was on his game. He took all the kudos when we know it was you guys. And if it was, even for the artwork, he was doing black people's artwork before anyone even knew about Banksy. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, the thing is, as you know, I've actually been airbrushed out of the Soul to Soul and the Africa Centre history. At some point, as part of this documentary that we're building under raregroove.com and on our YouTube channel, the story is going to be told. Not just my story, but lots of people's stories. Because I don't think I was the only one who came out badly from those days in terms of, you know, not getting recognition, from, you know, not seeing part of the money pot. I mean, that was one of the things, it was one of the reasons I walked away from the Africa Centre, because I would say to Jazzy every single week for 6 months, look, we've got a queue of 700 people going round the block. You're paying me this £50. I'm actually your promotion partner. We set it up as Wicked Pulse and Soul to Soul. I design the flyers. I DJ 2 hours every week. I come in early. I stage it. I put up all the banners. All the banners are mine. And we should be promotion partners. But of course, Jazzy had his way of dealing with people in those days, and I would just get 50 quid every single week. Never saw any of the profits. And yeah, I'm definitely pissed off. And I actually had to walk away after 6 months because I felt as though I wasn't being treated, you know, with the respect that was due to me, especially as I was, you know, the partner or the promotion crew partner that instigated it and set it all up. That's part of my story, but we've got to return to your story. But no, thanks for bringing that up, because there are very few people who obviously know my role at the Africa Centre. Very few people know my story, and I will be telling my story as part of this documentary.
You tell your story, but that goes to show some of the people, because a lot of the people, it's the same thing with, what do we call him? If we can't say his name, Such Man. You understand? They've been up there writing tunes on the scene, and there was other people in the same scene as them that don't get a bringing, but Such Man is always getting the bringing.
Yeah.
You understand? And then Such Man is going to be the face for that thing when there were loads of guys and girls You remember that one called Kat who used to do the dancing? Every minute she was up on the doing the thing. I don't hear anything of her anymore. Don't understand how, you know, what happened to the team, or is it a team, or, you know, someone's got to take the flak. But it's not the first time I've heard it, and it might not be the last time I heard it. But when you're talking about people who help build a scene, you know, it's always the strong men who don't even get noticed. And I've been there myself, so I know how you feel and I know what you mean. But sometimes, what do? Bite our tongue and not say our story, or forever hold the peace, or nah, not for me. I'd rather the whole truth or nothing but the truth, because it's our journey. We've got one life, you understand? Be nice to your friends. Be good to your friends. You know, we've done a song like that with Confucius, who, you know, be good to your friends.
Well, Mark from Poetic Funk, when I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, he said, pay homage to the people that have influenced you. So I think that's really, really important, you know, to know where you are in the you know, this evolving tree, and to give homage to the people before you, so that everybody understands, you know, how the scene evolved. I'm really interested, obviously, in this story, because your story links so, you know, intimately into my story, and it's called The Untold Story of Raregroove. So, you know, this is a platform for everybody who was there to tell their story as it was. It's raw, it's truthful, it's open. So this is, you know, your chance to give kudos to anyone that you feel might have been left out of the story, or people that you know, or tell us a little bit about your journey and some of the people, you know, that you know were part of the scene, who may not have got a mention.
There was loads of people. If I'm thinking a particular part of the scene, or
I mean, this is the untold story of Raregroove, so it's focused mainly on that sort of funky, organic, syncopated music. You mentioned Turn Off the Lights, classic Raregroove track. So it's all those records that we were playing at the Africa Centre that got played at Wag Club, Cat in the Hat, at Norman's parties, the Shaken Finger Pop parties. So it's kind of that funky JBs mixed with the quirkier tracks that we brought in, the funk tracks like Headhunters, Jungle Fever, like the Chaka-Chas, where we kind of created this sort of like funky melting pot. So it wasn't just soul.
See,
it wasn't.
You've gone deep. You go deep. For us, we're just college students. We're glad that we don't have to be too black. You understand? We can be black and quirky. You understand? Black and funky, black and soulful, and black and rare groove. Half of those tunes get sampled for hip hop now. So that's why we like hip hop, or that's why it's, you know, you can make a sell, because not that sample. But for those times, you know, the people who haven't got a mention, I can't even remember half of their names. I would say, like, you know, who don't even get a proper mention was Barry K. Sharp. You understand? You have to go in, and he had a #1. You understand? You got Femi Fem. You understand? Well, they just one-hit wonders, and then we get older, and then we move on. You know, there was loads of groups out there doing stuff, but some got played and some didn't get played. Sometimes you can go to Soul and see something live, like Rose Windross, or whatever her name is. She could belt a song. Does she get mentioned? Does she get, I don't know, like...
Well, of course, Fair Play, if you listen to the lyrics, is actually, it's a tribute to the Africa Centre,
yeah.
You know, with H and Jazzy B, and it's all about expression. Yeah. But again, you know, did you hear the name Wicked Pulse? Anyway, I'm digressing.
No, because there was a thing called Wicked Pulse, you understand, and it was always on the flyer, but no one said it was management, no one said it was things. I thought it was a DJ.
Well, Wicked Pulse actually was my sort of DJ name.
Yeah.
But I worked with a guy called Andy Shaft. Andy Shaft was a guy, again, I just met him on the street, shook his hand and said, do you want to be my, you know, would you like to be my business sort of manager? And, you know, we worked together on the Africa Centre. We did a couple of parties before that. The evolution of Wicked Pulse actually was, before I met Andy, I was working with Ian Dewhurst, who was working in the EMI club promotion department. When we first set up Wicked Pulse, he then moved to 4th and Broadway, and then later on did all the compilations, the Mellow Groove compilations, the Rare Groove compilations, and the Jazz Funk compilations on master cuts. So he's very well known for that. And I started off working with Ian on Wicked Pulse. I mean, that's just a little bit about Wicked Pulse.
But Wicked Pulse, did they put records out?
The funny thing is that I had some stuff that I was developing at the time of the Africa Centre under the name. I changed my DJ name, evolved to Too Damn Funky. So we were working on stuff, but it unfortunately never got released. In fact, Ian helped me get into the recording studio to record the first thing that I did called Mellow Groove. Mellow Groove was actually a tribute to the mellow session that I played between 2 and 3 o'clock at the Africa Centre. And I found this amazing DJ through a friend of mine called Robert Day. His name was CJ. CJ McIntosh went on to win the Disco Mix Club Championships through Andy Shaft, who kind of took him under his wing, because, you know, I was working with Andy. Andy met CJ through me, and the rest was history. I mean, CJ went on to do Pump Up the Volume. Yeah. So that you've just touched upon something really interesting, which that whole era really influenced the whole of the UK sound. So you had things like Pump Up the Volume.
Pump Up the Volume.
You had Mark Moore, who you've just mentioned, with S Express. You had Bomb the Bass and Cold Cut.
What about, where does there's a tune called Are You Conscious? Check It Out. And just saying those lyrics, Are You Conscious? Check It Out. Come see what we're all about. Conscious Records. Alex.
Yeah, Alex Michelson. I mean, even to this day, you know, I'm talking to him on a regular basis, and I'm going to interview Alex at some point.
I love Alex. He's got such a cool, personal, calm nature that I've seen mad things happen, and he's still cool. Yeah, I'd have blown my fuse or shouted at least. Alex just like it's just cool. And yeah, I speak to him from now and again, but it's people like him who gave me a job. So he made me make a backdrop for his Conscious Records, and we were doing backdrops before Banksy came out. That's what I'm saying. With people like that, you know, allowing us. I used to ask him loads and loads of questions. I still ask him questions up to today and say, what do we do about that? And get a get a referral, like, what do you think I should do that? And he kind of breaks it down in a cool way, still exactly the same way. And he's usually on point.
Well, interesting thing, well, just to put it in, you know, in the timeline. So, you know, I love Alex because Alex, we did a club called Slow Motion. Now, Slow Motion is very interesting because that was, I think that was sort of 1991. So we're talking about 4 years after the Africa Centre. And Slow Motion was actually an idea I came up with from the Mellow Groove set that I did between 2 and 3 at the Africa Centre, where I was playing, I mean, I used to call it Mellow Groove. It's since become known as kind of two-step, and it's, you know, I would be playing things like, at the time, there was a side effect track, I can't remember what it was, but there was things like Rising to the Top, Leo Sunship, Give Me the Sunshine, all that beautiful mellow groove. I would play it in the last hour of the Africa Centre, and it just created this amazing, amazing vibe. And from that experience of just, you know, standing on the decks and watching everyone just rock out to this like beautiful, beautiful music on the amazing soul-to-soul sort of reggae sound system that just had this pumping bass, that lived with me. And I remember I went to a friend of mine called Michelle, Misty Oldland, and I said to her, look, I love this music. I'd love to do a club, you know, that really represents this. And, you know, I want to play music, and I don't want to play any music over 100 beats per minute. I said, do you think we can do it? Because it was at the beginning of the house music scene, when obviously, you know, you had pumping 120 beats per minute and everyone was dancing to house music. And I said, look, do you remember that stuff I used to play at the Africa Centre in the last hour? In fact, there was a German electro record, which was my kind of signature sign-off tune that I used to play right at the end. And it was meant to be played at 45, but I played it at 33, and it just had this beautiful, huge chugging bass because I slowed it down. And it lasted about 8 minutes, and everyone used to just rock out to this tune, which I called the Mellow Groove. And it was always a cover-up. No one ever knew what it was, but people would dance to it for like 10, 15 minutes right at the end. Even when the lights went on, and it just created this beautiful atmosphere. So we did this club called Slow Motion, and at the time, Misty, her boyfriend was Jake Nava, and so it was Misty and Jake, and we got Busby's on a Tuesday night. This all relates to Alex, by the way. I'm coming to it. Don't worry. So Michelle and Jake said, look, you know, if we're going to promote it on a Tuesday night, we're going to need a slightly bigger crew. And they knew Ronald and Blaze. So they bought Ronald and Blaze. So it was Slow Motion was a collective of 5 people based on playing music under 100 beats per minute. And I wanted to call it Mellow Groove, and Jake came up with the name Slow Motion. Slow Motion, I think, is a much better name, and Slow Motion stuck. And we promoted that for, I mean, we really went hard promoting that. Now, the reason I'm telling you this story is Alex used to bring me down all the Conscious Records white labels. And because I knew everyone was going to kick ass, I would literally, he would bring it down on the night. I wouldn't even need, maybe I would just dip it with my headphones, and then I would play his tracks when the place was absolutely rocking. So he would bring me down things like...
So you're the reason why I bought those tunes?
Well, I used to play Lalomi Washburn. Do you remember the Lalomi Washburn track with the massive bass line? Can't remember what it's called.
Do you know what? I remember anything you play, I'll remember it. But the names on the tune, what would I do? Go up to the DJ and say, what's the name of that tune you're playing? I wasn't one of those guys. Well, I was just like, I would hear stuff, and then I would go down to, what's that opposite the Piccadilly Theatre? Groove Records.
Groove Records,
yeah. And I'd go there and I'd get what I need. I heard that one at the weekend. I heard that one at the weekend. And I would go down there, you know, and I don't know, there'll be a few people in Groove Records just listening. It's like the ultimate...
Well, that's where the imports came in, and that's where they came in fresh. And you always want to be on top of it. I mean, I remember I bought Scully D PSK in Groove Records, and it had that huge big like thumping bass. You didn't know what it sounded like, and I actually played Scully D PSK on the Africa Centre sound system, on the Soul to Soul sound system, and when the bass drum came in, just went boom, and the whole place just filled up with bass.
I've still got. See how that came straight out? I can go in there and find Conscious Records straight away, but...
Yeah, well, anyway, as I said, this isn't my story, but I wanted to bring Alex in here because Alex is a really important part of the story, like post-Rare Groove, when the acid house... Sorry, not acid house, when the acid jazz scene started. Because we used to have everyone come down, you know, the brand new heavies will come down. Everyone would come down to Slow Motion and absorbed this frigging awesome music.
Yeah.
And we stuck to our policy. We never played anything above 100 beats per minute. And although I don't think, you know, we can be responsible for the acid, the acid jazz scene, we were certainly a hub and a melting pot for all the musicians and producers who would all descend on Tuesday nights to Slow Motion to test out their, you know, their white labels and, you know.
I've got a photograph of me, Cola and Barry, and maybe Nick Newlands going to Slow Motion, and we were dressed like Barry's white guy. He had this slick thing going on. We had our slick thing, and we was going there to dance. You understand? Them time with the acid jazz, the dancing became like the dancing. If you could body pop back in the day, the dancing would have been easy for you. You understand? If you was like you know, really technical dancer, you would wear spats and braces to the club and pop off move. If you was really, you know, really wanting to express yourself, you'd have a dancing partner on, you'd have some moves with him, and you'd be working in unison with each other. Like, you know, do you know what? We used to dance for about 4 or 5 hours, and I can only dance for about 10, 15 minutes nowadays, you understand? Or if you put on a Running Man tune, I'm like, wow, did we used to dance that long, all night long, and sweat for that time, and, you know, not even drinking as much alcohol as they're drinking now. But what a time. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Femi, and of course one of the massive tunes at Slow Motion was Apparently Nothing, The Young Disciples.
Yeah.
And I remember I was playing that one night at Slow Motion, and you know, it's got this enormous bass line. And actually, the Maximus sound system, Maximus is the club in Leicester Square where we did it every Tuesday night. But that sound system was actually pretty good once everyone had got in. I mean, it really had. It wasn't a reggae sound system, but it was a very good sound system. So when you heard Lolomi Washburn, Apparently Nothing, those tracks just were friggin' awesome. And I remember one night I was playing Apparently Nothing, and somebody tapped me on the back, and I mean, the place was absolutely rammed. And this guy said to me, "Excuse me, would you mind playing this track?" And he handed me a DAT. And I looked at him and I was like, well, you know, fat chance of me playing a DAT in this club. You know, I've got 2 decks here. We're playing vinyl. But I looked at him, and he looked a nice guy. And I looked around, and lo and behold, because the club often did PAs, there was a DAT player, like really low down. And so I put this DAT in, and I could hardly hear it, but it sounded like a really nice track. And I'm playing Apparently Nothing. So you've got to come out with something heavy after Apparently Nothing. Well, I said, I looked at him, and I did the thumbs up because I had it all lined up, and I thought, worst case scenario, fade it out, put another track on, the one that I've got lined up. I can't remember what I had lined up. But
DJ.
Anyway, you know what that friggin' track was that this guy had brought me fresh down from his mixing desk on his studio? It was Revival by Martine Giraud. I don't know whether you remember, that particular track. It was called The Revival. And that was a tribute to the music that was played in the Rare Groove, And I think the lyrics go something like, "Smoke-filled rooms with an amber glow," which kind of summed up the vibe that we'd had back in all the warehouse parties, back in the Africa Centre. It was smoke-filled rooms with an amber glow, because, you know, it was always low lit.
I should have known that when I was writing this book, because in my book, my first pages was like, "Stop that kid. A boy just ran past me. He had stole this woman's handbag from a cab office, but he was using us for cover. But we were on our way to a rap attack dance." It's my first time raving. But, you know, when I mentioned the story, I said, when we walked into the place, you couldn't cut the smoke with a knife. You understand? And the blue light behind. It's just when you're a kid and you walk into the club, little Mr. Smoke, blue light, music playing, girl on some wine. It's music and DJs and MCs, just like, you know, the CT. I never knew he was in Family Quest.
You're referring to Emix.
Emix, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's another
and
real...
I've got his acetate right there, and I can show you that as well, because I've still got it. How many years? 32, 6 late, 30-something years. 32, 3 years later? How long is that?
Well, I always looked up to Emix, because Emix was, you know, he was the soul-to-soul MC.
He was, yeah. No, you're bringing it all back. You're bringing it all back. You see what I'm saying?
You see, to me, Emix, I always call him like the spiritual channel of the music. So we were playing the music, but you know, I mean, I'm quite, you know, I'm dry. I'm not an entertainer DJ. I just play the music. You know, Jazzy B would be, if you don't want to dance, fuck off. I mean, that was Jazzy's big line. But then there was, you know, Emix, who brought the music alive. In fact,
so he's the one who invented the bumping bass for the happy race.
No, I think, I mean, I'd love to interview Jazzy as part of this documentary, and I'm pretty damn sure that is Jazzy's line. But
yeah.
we'll get to that hopefully by talking to Jazzy.
If you let the audience hear how I've got this acetate floppy disk, and how they used to advertise the raves as well as the flyers, I don't know how much that would cost, because you'll give out a record as a flyer.
Yeah, well, CT London were very, very innovative. I think because you actually played it to me, you sent me a WhatsApp of that, and there was another one which I've got, which has got Robert Pereno doing vocals over Float On. I don't know whether you've heard that one. There's another flexi disc, yeah, which was for another I think it was for a CT London party. But again, you know, that was all happening just at the same time, maybe a little bit before the Africa Centre, and that all that music and everything that was going on at the time fed into the energy that was kind of on the streets, and the buzz of the connections between everybody who used to come down.
You see, but this is the thing. If you just explained to me how stupid I am, for the simple reason I thought Emix's name was CT. So I've been going, who's this artist called CT? CT getting busy right now. Listen up, and when you hear the tune, and then I know Michelle, who's called I think it's Mystery from Family Quest. She's mentioned Emix, and I never twigged. Look how many years I've not even, I never really twigged until the other night when I saw him in Ladywell.
Yeah, well, you came down to our funky reggae party, which was the sister party of the London Rare Groove party, right, that we're doing Fox and Firkin, Lewisham, next one, little bit of a plug, 7th of May, Saturday, 7th of May, London Rare Groove party. Ooh. Emix will be on the mic. Yeah. We got a young. Oh,
man, you're going to be throwing me back, man. Jesus Lord, because she's been going on about Emix and Harry and Emix. I'm like, oh, if I knew it was CT, but it wasn't CT, it was Emix, who was Soul to Soul's DJ, MC. The history, you just blown it out.
Well, yeah, so CT London, I think it was Chris Checkley and Robert Pereno. Right. And they were actually like, you know, the Sloane Square trendy crowd. Right. And they managed to get warehouses through their connections, yeah, you know, with the sort of rich and famous, yeah, at the time. I think I DJ'd at one of their parties. It was the London Dungeon party, which I think was a CT London party. And there was another one in a huge big, they managed to get a car park somewhere. But again, I can't remember. I think that was the Float On flyer. And at some point, what we'll do is we will record the flexi discs and we'll put them up onto the Rare Groove YouTube channel, which you can find. Anyone who's watching this, raregroove.com will take you straight to our channel. But yeah, so what we've done is we kind of, as you brought in Alex from Conscious Records, I just wanted to put that in context in the timeline. We're sort of zooming on to sort of 1990, around 1990, 1991. But let's go back to the Africa Centre, because again, I want you to really, because a lot of people weren't there. These nights have gone down as sort of legends. And there was a particular vibe because of the sound system, the people. It was the first time in the West End, you know, that that black people could get into a club because we had a door policy where anyone could get in. You didn't have to be dressed in a flour sack. You didn't have to be dressed with your trousers turned inside out. You could just turn up with your trainers. You could turn up with your trainers, or, you know, Dr. Light would turn up with a set of lights around him. Yeah. You could dress up however you liked, and it didn't matter whether it was 99% black and 1% white, or 99% white and 1% black. It was all about the vibe on the dance floor and bringing this music, which was, to me, magical music, and playing it for the first time on a massive rig.
That's one of the places that never bothered about white and black. And there were Asian girls in there popping up. I bet they snuck out of their house to come inside there. But you know what? That's one place that was just so united. We was all one, and we was all cool. And, you know, back on the Monday, you might be, back to a van driver. You understand? It's kind of funny, you know, that that you could have the Sunday to express yourself, and you're back to college or work the next day, and you still get up for work, you know. You're like, it's kind of like, you know, used to look forward to it. Used to buy yourself a new shirt on a Saturday just for the Sunday.
So who were the group of people that you would turn up with at the Africa Centre? I mean, you had quite a sort of a nice sort of extended clique, didn't you? I think
because we were fresh out of our boarding school, and we were going to college, and, you know, some of us were just doing work experience, you know. I went with the people I went to school with, so the actual people I've actually grown up with. The people who I got to go there from Croydon or Fulton Heath were my cousins and my friends, and I'd say, come down to this, and they still mention it. You introduced us to West End, or you introduced us to the Africa Centre. But I didn't think I wanted them to know about this place. I thought I'd be really cool if I told them. You know what I mean? They'll, you know, and it'd be me who told them, and I'd be really cool. So I told everybody. So I don't know. I used to go down with Jerry Clavier because we lived in we lived in Holborn, and then we could walk home from the Africa Centre. It was just bizarre. You understand? It was. I don't know, we had such a good time. We still talk about it up to today, and remembering every single thing about, you know, even our escapades getting back home from that club, you know, or, you know, those guys who I grew up with, if it wasn't for the Africa Centre and Shake and Finger Pop and all these clubs and all these names, we wouldn't have nothing to talk about, you understand? Because the scene back then, there was a club every day of the week, you know. You know, you didn't have to go out every single day of the week, but you prepared yourself to go out well, as much as you can, you know. And music was at its best. DJs were at the best. I don't hear DJs like that now. I hear good DJs because now with the technical stuff, and, you know, you've got to be able to be a good DJ and break it down to the crowd. Them guys, you didn't have to mix in. You didn't have to mix the tune in. You could just, you could do a jerk and it'll still sound good. You understand? Or it wasn't so, the crowd weren't like, they were all in favour of the DJ.
Well, I mean, it was, for me, it was the excitement of putting together a collage of different...
You got technical, and we didn't even know it was technical.
Well, you know, I never mixed. I think that there was one mix I used to do, which was my signature mix. I used to play Funkbox Party I used to play Funkbox Party out of Funky Rasta because they had the same electro TR-808 production sound. So that was the only time I'd mix, because for me, you see, Rare Groove, each tune, it's almost like there's one great track on an album, and you know, you've got to find those tracks. We used to go digging for quirky kind of tracks that sort of broke away from the mold. So every track had a particular character. So when you played it, not only was there a killer bass line and a great vocal, but you know, you mentioned Turn Off the Lights. What an amazing track. There's no other track like it. And that's why I think it's become known as a Rare Groove classic. And to me, you know, Rare Groove is the syncopation. It's the quirky production. It's the organic production. These people were playing real instruments. So their life experiences are talking through the music. So it's not just like programmed, like 4 to the floor. So, you know, our Rare Groove music that we were looking for and digging for back then, we were specifically looking for music in, you know, in the soul to soul, jazzy, it's all about expression. We were looking for those particular records that
you created those scenes because you had those clubs we still went to. Even if you weren't working with Soul to Soul, we still went to those clubs. But I never knew. I knew you as I always thought you was the boss, but I think I've only ever seen you DJ with my eyes. I've heard you most probably loads of times, but actually gone like that. And then say, the boss is DJing. You understand? The DJ's a bot. And it's kind of like, but we were that young, so we were that naive. You understand? But when you said something earlier on, it's something that a lot of things just twigged to me.
Yeah, well, you know, because just before this interview started, you said something really interesting to me, that you always thought I was the po-faced, dull-faced guy who never smiled.
Yeah, you was this dude, right? You always used to dress smart. I remember you being, I think it was black and red, and you looked at me and I looked away because you looked too serious.
Well, I was always very serious and I never talked to anybody, and I was always kind of behind the scenes and no one really knew what my role was, what I did. But I just loved the music, and I was there. It was.
I thought you was the boss with Jazzy B, and because I just know that I was listening to a conversation you were saying that you design these, and I was like, he's designing black people's t-shirts or designing black people on like there was loads of designs. There wasn't just those 2 little designs or the one that's on the. There was always these kind of...
So so to get the story absolutely straight, I was responsible for the original flyers, the Underground Funk Pass, and for the first 6 months of the promotion. Now, because I left, I kind of left a vacuum in terms of like graphic designer. That was when Jazzy, you know, brought in the iconic, and that wasn't me. I didn't draw the iconic funky dread head.
I think I know the person who drew that as well.
Yeah, well, we will be interviewing. I'm hoping to get an interview with him. So, you know, that's all going to be hopefully part of this incredible legacy and story. But yeah, just to get it absolutely straight, I was not responsible for the funky dread artwork. However, for the first 6 months,
ones with dancing with the African drums and stuff.
Well, I did the original flyer where there's a kind of a man standing. It's like an abstract dancer, which looks like he's dancing in like the John Travolta.
I was gonna say that, and I try to stop myself, but because I remember it. I remember it all, and I've got some bits and bobs around in my archives in the nest about with these pictures in there. They were funny, they were quirky, and they were actually can get you in the building.
Well, the interesting thing with that particular, I mean, I went on to dance. I always use dancers on my flyers. That's been kind of my brand, you know, ever since I started. Even when I was about, I think I was 14 at school, and I designed the flyer at school in 1973, 1974. It's in the Squeeze, you know, the punk band Squeeze. Yeah. It's in their archive because they were playing live that night. They were our local band before they released a record. And I designed the flyer with a dancing girl on the front. So my sort of, my legacy goes right back to, well, I think when I was sort of 1974, when I was started designing flyers for my school disco in Catford. So anyway, that's part of the story. But interestingly, that little figure on the original Soul to Soul flyer, I used to blow up the texture. I don't know whether you remember, but if you did a photocopy, the photocopy would break down anything into this kind of weird crackled texture. Yeah. And if you blew up that crackled texture, I would go searching for little dancers. And that actually is just a pure, I didn't draw it.
Clever.
I didn't draw it. It's actually a piece of texture from when you blow up a piece of crackled photocopy texture.
My kind of art.
Yeah.
You know, abstracts.
Abstracts, found art. But when I saw this like little dancer with the big hand, do you remember the big hand? Yeah. The hand, it just looked like a sort of funky John Travolta.
Yeah. Whenever you want, I'll make them into T-shirts, man. But I bought a book. I think it's going to be behind me on the shelf. I bought this book just because of those pictures, because they look like those pictures from back in those days. So it sets a pattern in your mind and a memory that's my happy place. Soul to Soul, those pictures. If I want to be happy, I can go to my old Filofax and just look. It's that it brings that.
Well, everything was just raw and slapped together on a photocopier.
So, question for you. Do you feel that you're an inventor?
You see, my problem, I've had a problem all the way through my life, is that I've always been so far ahead of the curve and so far ahead of the zeitgeist at the point where I'm sort of holding up my hand and shouting for everyone to get involved. Yeah. No one takes me seriously because they can't see it in the context of the timeline. Yeah. And I could give you like 100 examples.
It's even now, you know, because you're making me twig, and I'm jazzy. Do you know what? What a shrewd businessman. But on the other hand, you don't look like the archetypal of these dudes that invent this stuff for us kids to have a peace of mind and to have a focus and get on with our lives. You understand? Like, if I didn't have that kind of music, I'd been stabbed, shot and killed by now because I'm hanging with my brother. You understand? It was that saved my journey. The
music became your sanctuary.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm serious about it as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, really interesting, something you just touched upon. You know, saying I was this kind of miserable kind of bastard in the background.
Dude's on £50 a week. So I get it. That's why.
That's why I was miserable, not because I was the boss. Because in a previous conversation, I
thought you was the boss.
You thought I was a millionaire. Yeah. I mean, you just told me you thought I was like this rich. Well, no, everything that I did, I started from the ground up with a maximum of 50 quid in my pocket. Yeah. And all that money, if I made 50 quid on the night of Soul to Soul, which Jazzy used to give me the £50, and to me that was just taking a piss, because we had a queue of people round the corner. We had 700 people coming into this club. Not only that, his brother was making all the money on the bar, which he was getting a cut of. I never saw any of that. And I should have been as the co-promoter and the person who, you know, was on the street promoting it. Yeah, that's why I was so friggin' miserable. Well, no, I'm kind of being facetious.
No, and you've always had manners and respect, but I understand. Like, I'm like, yes, a white miserable guy. Tomorrow never comes tomorrow.
But no, at the time, I wish I had. You know, you said shrewd businessman, but the problem was in those days, I was a creative. I wasn't a businessman.
Definitely.
And all I wanted to do was bring people together for positive energy and vibes and magical music on the dance floor. That's all my mission ever was.
And I believe you did that, you know. I believe you really did that. And that time I saw you DJing, it's when you see white guys DJing, because you're having such a good time, and you turn around and you're going like, rah, rah. I noticed that. I was there in a time of my life. I've seen that. You're one of the first people I've done that to, but I've done that to loads of people now. Like, rah! But one of the first people who was playing that style was you, Mark, and a few others. And I will say Jazzy B, but he made that scene look like it was his scene, you understand? When really, you know, Roots Maneuver made that scene look like his scene, and he's got all this body of work. The only reason why Roots Maneuver became Roots Maneuver is because I was in your scene. So we're not doing this for blacks people, Rodney. So what are we doing this for? The smellies, crusties and grungies. They're the new trendies. You understand? It's a whole different ethos, but you've used that format to make it into what trendiness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of my big things, you know, even back then it was never about colour. Yeah. And I could never be, you know, entertainer, cool black DJ who had all the lingo on the mic. I tried to just let the music speak for itself. So, you know, if the music didn't speak for itself, I hope I never tried to be something that I wasn't. Does that make sense? Because there are so many people.
You could have been more than you tried not to. You tried not to be. You could have been more, because we just had attitude. And I think because we had such a hard time growing up, in the sense of, like, you know, I've got a brother. We come from a boarding school, but first we was in a children's home. Music is the way forward. I don't know about music of today, because they've got so much different genres and they're so spoiled. You know, fancy listening to something in the 80s that come from late 60s or early 70s, you know. I thought we'd be listening to something that was more trendy, like the reggae music and the thing. But I wasn't really into pretending I was Jamaican. I talk Cockney, I sound like a white man. It's just that it sounds pathetic. All I can say, wheel up the tune, wheel up the tune. That's about the best I can do. But for the scene, if it wasn't for that scene, there is a lot of us, a lot of people, boys, who wouldn't be here. And you know what? And then when you got some boys who didn't know if they were gay or straight, but they had a sense of freedom, you understand? These music allowed them to express themselves. But you see, the girls who turned up, you would find who you were. You'd find who if you were straight or gay. But I don't know, it wasn't important then, but it was. Because a lot of people were hiding who they are or not being who they are. And it was because everything was dominatedly black, meaning everyone was doing the two-step. Some boring dance or winding with a girl, some slow wind. We weren't in those clubs. Those clubs weren't really, we didn't grow up that. We grew up in a...
You like the raw, funky kind of,
Yeah, express yourself.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we were trying to do. I mean, I always say this, that, you know, the music we were digging for was the antidote to the commercial crap that was around in the 80s that was being played at the Hammersmith Palais, that was being played in the suburban soul clubs. And I hated that 80s sound, you know, with a vengeance. And we were looking for something grittier, something a bit more raw, that the dancers, again, we have to go back to it, could express themselves to, and, like, you know, just go on this, like, funky flow and enjoy the journey of the night, rather than being kept on a 4/4 rhythm all the way through the night. Because house music was sort of just about to explode, and there was some house music, around.
There was like them clubs on Tyson Road on the London Bridge, like that introduced me to house.
You're talking about the early warehouse parties. Yeah.
And but it didn't introduce me to drugs. There wasn't no drugs there. You understand? It's house music with no drugs. You understand? So I don't know. The alcohol was the drugs, and smoking cigarettes was the drugs, or a bit of weed. But you know, when house music started getting into drugs, we wasn't even into it then. You understand? It was something that you thought you had to be involved because everybody was going to the festival. Like, okay, something to do on the weekend or some special occasion that's happening. But when I heard Norman J playing at these festivals, that's when we're going there, because he's playing the sound. How come Norman J gets all the blinds? Is it because of his name? I don't know. There was something. I don't know why he seems to be the archetype, or you know. And another one, Trevor Nelson. They weren't my favourite DJs. I'm just telling you. I love him. I love Trev, but he's not my favourite DJ. He's a selector. See what I'm saying? You have to go to these warehouses where you hear this stuff, or these odd backroom clubs. You understand? Remember BPM?
Yep. Yeah.
It's just like it was a cross between the house music and still playing, or somebody was mixing that funky stuff with the music. It's called Beats PM. I think it was around the back of Heavens, or I think that was Embankment. Kind of like all these clubs used to pop up, but I didn't really think about who put these clubs on. How did they get the thing? So to me, you are an inventor. And to me, you are somebody who did help Jazzy B. I know that through my own eyes, because I was there those years. Listen, see who done the artwork, and going, I've still got the artwork up to today. We're talking 30 years later. Why have I still got that? Because it made a print. I've never thrown anything.
Resonated with you.
Yeah. And I always go back to my happy place sometimes by just looking at some of those things. You understand? Even when, you know, even when I'm talking to my kids, I'm saying, you don't know when I met your mum, you know. It's kind of like, to me, there's good times. I call that my happy place. That's why I still got the music. That's why I'm glad I still got records.
Well, I mean, to hear your story and what you're telling me today, you know, in a way, because I just sort of, I turned my back on the Africa Centre. I went away for years and years and years. And it's only really in the last few years that I've thought, do you know what? None of the guys who were flying the flag and who were controlling the narrative back then are really supporting the atmosphere, the vibe, the energy that we were setting out. A lot of people say to me, oh, Steve, you can't bring back the Africa Centre. You know, you're a dino. I've heard people on speakerphone talk about me. One of the people you actually mentioned in this interview, I'm not going to tell their names, but I was hearing another friend conversation with him, and he was on speakerphone calling me a dinosaur and saying, yeah, Steve will never do this, he'll never do that. But because it's lived in my heart all this time, and I was on the stage absorbing the energy from the dance floor, and you know, I helped create it. It lives in my soul, and even to this day, as I said, you know, my mission is to bring back the vibes of the Africa Centre.
I'll say, sorry to cut you, I'd say what a nice thing to do, in the sense of, like, I work with some agents now. I say, we want to bring back the Africa Centre. What do you mean by that? The DJs at the Africa Centre, it started from somewhere, and now their movies are in Hollywood, their music's in Hollywood, and it must have come from somewhere, and somebody must have invented it. You understand? So to me, I could phone up an agent tomorrow and say, yeah, I've got Soul to Soul on Wicked Post. Soul to Soul on Wicked Post. Who's that? It's Soul to Soul on Wicked Post. You understand? Like, we can give, and it's what it is about. It's about, when we were doing it before coronavirus came, was putting shows on. And some people want to do a show. Karen Wheeler can't do a show, but Rose could do a show. It's how you promote something, or you keep it going. That's my job. That's what I do. You understand? Like, I love doing that. We'll do it down. We'll start off at...
Well, we're stage one is doing these parties at the Fox and Firkin. They're going to be once a month from May First one, as I mentioned, 7th of May,
yeah,
Africa
I'm
Centre
supporting
vibe.
that.
You see,
I'm supporting that as well, because I've got the flyers, and it's something I believe in, and I want to take it further. I want some of those artists, some of the artists that might be, if they're still alive, to come and do the jazz cafe, to come and have a night at these things. You understand? So like even with the flyer and what goes down, you know, like I believe in this. This is what it used to look like back in the day. All these little figures, all these little figurines and stuff. This is what it used to look like. So to me, it's that's what I'm going to be advertising. I don't expect everybody to be 50 years of age who comes to there. I expect to see a young crowd, the next generation of funky people.
Well, one of the main reasons I'm doing this, my son is, he's 32 now, and he'd never heard me DJ up until we did the party in February. So, you know, I've got this huge record collection of this amazing music, and I just wanted my son to know what the music's about. I mean, he came to the party and said, yeah, not my cup of tea, Dad, but at least I've done that. But for me, it's not about wheeling out, you know, all the old people. It'd be lovely to see them, and you know, it's amazing when the old school come out, which they do. And some, you know, some sadly have passed on, some are in wheelchairs, some of the dancers, because they used to drop on their knees, the jazz dancers, they can't dance anymore. But to me, it's not about that anymore. It's now about passing on the legacy to the next generation. Because returning to what I was just saying, nobody's flying the flag. So, you know, you go and listen to Norman play out, you go and listen to Jazzy play out. I went to hear Jazzy in Camden the other day. He's playing Candy Dance, for frig's sake. And to me, you know, those people who are part of the scene, I don't know whether they've lost touch with it or whether it's commercial pressure that makes them play in a particular way. But I've always stuck to my guns, and I've said, this is my playout box. My playout box has not changed since the Africa Centre. I've only added to it with new music that's been discovered through the world opening up, through places like Discogs, where you've discovered there was music that is just as good as that we didn't know about. That, you know, we call it rare groove, but the really rare stuff we didn't even know about at the time of the Africa Centre. We were just playing the stuff we could get on imports. But there's a whole new series of music that's kind of opened up to the world through places like Discogs, which we now put into the set.
It makes sense.
And I'm often like finding a piece of music and I go, oh my God, I would love to transport myself back to the Africa Centre and then drop these tracks, you know, into the set. But we've got an opportunity now to do it with these parties. It's called the London Rare Groove Party, for anybody listening.
Yeah, I've seen it advertising. And I've seen it, you know, all it has to do is just keep on advertising. But I know billboard postings, and I've got the billboard postings guys as well. So, you know, it's just, advertising's a must, and advertising's expensive.
Well, just returning to the party, Emix is going to play. He'll be on the mic, and you know, one of the things I absolutely love about Emix, and again, you said you didn't even know who he was, but you know, I've got to know him in the last few years.
I always thought his name from the record I've got, his name was CT, because he says CT getting busy right now, listen up. So and then I've been knowing Misha, who's in Family Quest for years, been checking her like, hey, how you doing? Rare, what? Yeah, I've got an Emix this story about this Harry and Elove, Emix, and I'm thinking to myself. So when I saw him the other night, I was like, yeah, and then Yankee goes to me, yeah, Emix. So I thought like, oh, that's Emix. Then somebody says it's like, no, and I twigged he looks like the guy from the Soul to Soul days, and it was him who actually.
So here's the interesting thing about Emix, and again, you know, his story is absolutely fascinating because He started off as an MC on a reggae set. He then was in Family Quest, the first British hip-hop group. Then he did Africa Centre with us. Well, when I say us, I mean he was the Soul to Soul MC. Now, there's a really interesting story why he hasn't worked with Soul to Soul since that time. I'm not going to tell that. I'm going to let Emix tell his own story, because that's a fascinating story.
Well, he can get like fast 10 grand if he just joined the app called blurb.com. And you write, it'll take him about 2 hours. If he's got photographs to prove back in the day you're that guy, I'm sure you can make a quick 10 grand in a minute. But if he's got a story to tell, how come people don't do these books? I've done a book.
Well, Emix, as I said, Emix has got a fascinating story, and he's got a whole book. In fact, he's got a film in him.
Yeah.
So from the Africa Centre, basically, he was so pissed off with what went down at the Africa Centre that he turned his back on Rare Groove and the funk and everything. He then went on to become like one of the big MCs on the early acid house and house scene. So he was working at Confusion and all those early warehouse parties that again came out of the early warehouse party scene. So, you know, he went from, you know, reggae to hip hop to Rare Groove and ended up in house. And, you know, since meeting him over the last few years and asking him to work with me and saying, look, this is my mission, this is what I've always wanted to do, and now is an opportunity to do it. You know, all these, I mean, we're 38 years later from, you know, the Africa Centre now, but, you know, we're still alive, we've still got the music, Emix is still on point, and to me, that's the essence of what we were still doing. So I hope Emix will tell his story as part of the unfolding story.
Yeah, I'm intrigued, and I think like you've intrigued me a lot. And Jazzy, I just got your back, but really, Jazz, be nice to the people on the way up, because this is the sort of thing that happens on the way down. You understand? The truth will be revealed, and I needed the truth because not that I put Jazzy B on a kudos. He's got the looks, he's got the clothes that makes you different from the rest. So, but you know, my journey and my story is the same, where I don't say I've been shafted, but it looks like that in my music career. And you know what? Be nice to your friends.
Well, again, this is the platform, the Untold Story of Rare Groove. I would love you to tell a story that's never been told before. Something that maybe is in your heart that you would love to be told as part of the story.
I'll have to think about that one for 2 seconds. In the sense of like what allowed me to be a music manager, an executive producer. I thought it was all about getting these gold records, and I don't even put them on my wall, for the simple reason is that the only accolade this is about. You understand? I realised that we just get older and these things just don't mean anything no more. The story is the best. But the story is the best. You have to live it, and you have to go through the motions. I mean, you're an inventor. You invented a scene. Yeah, you might have not. I invented a scene. I invented reggae hip hop. I invented grungy reggae hip hop. I invented Roots Maneuver, for the simple reason I have him around people that he steals words from. I don't want to be, I already am. And turn it into something great. When somebody says, I don't want to be, I already am. What do you think you're talking to? You do think, and it's like, and he's took it to somewhere else. That's really cool if you can do that. You understand? But you know, the people who invented things from me, who stopped me from getting stabbed and shot and going to jail, are people like yourself, and yeah, the one Jazzy B, and anyone who had a name like H. He doesn't get a mention. He saved me. because, you know, I would wait for the name H. It's just one word, one letter. Ah, yeah, H is playing, H is playing. You know what I mean? We done that with Jazzy B, but we thought he was like the face we thought he was your face. You're the boss, he's the face, and H is the DJ. For ages, until you actually go early, hang around, soak up the whole fucking 4 or 5 hours you're there. You understand? There was a time I got there, I was in their place for 5 hours. You understand? So when you were wiring up, I was there. You know what I mean? I didn't wait for you lot to take it down or anything. I was just there for a long time. And my mates were coming. There's always something to talk. We was always busy. The Africa Centre. Always busy. But I didn't know some of the things. When I see this whole documentary, I'm going to know 1 or 2 things. But I've always had Jazzy B's back. Like, he's the archetype of fucking Camden Town. You understand? Like, with the shop and the other little businesses he's had. But I still love him today, love him tomorrow. You know what I mean? Shrewd businessman. I've learnt now, Jazz. You know, I still gave him a t-shirt that I want to see the picture in there so I can get some sales. But, you know, we're just faces, innit?
Well,
we're all just coloured souls.
H is working with Perry Lewis, and I have approached H. I would love to get H's story. I'd love to sit down with him and talk.
I think people won't do it because I think Jazzy B's hurt a lot of people, but not intentionally. Some of the words, I've always got these words, but I've been stuck for words because I'm baffled about learning about, you know, I always thought you were the chairman, just the way you moved and profiled, and you look well, you understand, and you always well-to-do on, you know, and we had respect for you, a stranger, like, because of, like, you never got no trouble from us, but we used to give a lot of trouble.
Well, a funny thing is, you mentioned that I used to dress smart. Well, I used to wear, in order to spend my money on, because, you know, I never had more than 50 quid in my pocket. Yeah. That was the money that Jazzy would pay me. Yeah. Not only would I not have more than 50 quid, I'd be out the next day digging for the records for the next event. So, you know, that money disappeared quite quickly. And as far as dress went, the only way that I could afford clothes, I bought myself a nice leather jacket which lasted me you know, 2 or 3 years. I wore my DMs, my Levi's, not because they were trendy, but just because I didn't have to buy any other trousers, and I could afford more more on records. Yeah. So basically, that was, you know, that was what I was wearing. I was never suited up. I mean, you make it sound as though I'm like this. You was always looking good, but then again, most of the older guys were looking good. We try to catch up. What's he wearing? We'll try and wear what you're wearing. We went to Flip Hollywood or MASH or anything to get into the club sometimes or to fit in. You understand? Some people would think that's hey, wasn't that a second-hand clothes shop? Shh! Don't tell anybody. We still look good. Yeah, well, the dress code, because I found that if I wore my leather jacket, my t-shirt, my Levi's and my DMs, I could go to any club. I could go to a rockabilly club, and I'd fit in. I could go to a funk club. I could go to the Camden Palace, and that was, you know, it was a sort of dress code through necessity rather than like driven by fashion in those days.
It was cool. It was cool in those days. And I some of the pictures I've got now, you may really want to get some of the pictures out and say, yeah, look at those times. Because you know where Africa Centre was? We used to be down in about 2 doors down taking photographs, and they still got those kind of photographs. You know, I mentioned the other day, like, DJ Ratchet, I said, I wanted a quiff as big as his. His was so big. You know, it was like, hey, man. But, nah, man, I'm glad I got to learn a couple of things as well as say, you know what, some things that really inspired me. You know, Alex Conscious Record really inspired me, gave me time. I can only give that back and give him a mention. And some of the other people there, you know, his partner Gio, madman. but we love him.
Now you just mentioned Gio, and I've heard lots of stories through Alex, and stories he tells me that he can't actually tell me on camera.
Yeah.
And I think that when I phoned you up, because you came to our event a few days ago,
Yeah.
and you know, this isn't set up. This is totally spontaneous. You phoned me today. And I said, look, I'm doing the documentary, and I said, look, I'd just love to speak to you. So, you know, this is just so everybody knows, this isn't set up, it's not rehearsed.
It's just
we haven't talked for, well, we wouldn't have even talked back in the day.
Yeah, you was the boss.
Well, I was. You say I was the boss, yeah. But I was just in the background, probably just stressing.
Yeah,
actually,
yeah, definitely, and I get it now. But yeah.
So yeah, this documentary, the idea is it's just raw, spontaneous, warts and all, which is why we just keep rolling the camera.
Yeah.
But you touched upon something which is, when you mentioned Gio, that there is, and we have to go back to the beginning of our conversation with your brother. And I think, you know, earlier today when we were talking on the phone, just before I came over, you touched upon, and I know somebody else has mentioned it, you cannot, you know, you can't talk about this scene without divorcing it from the underworld.
Yeah.
So are we able to go down that path as part of this conversation?
I don't mind. I've got an underworld scene that I was running away from, but it helped save me because I can fight. And, you know, another thing is that I can read, so spiritually, mentally and physically I'm gonna win, because we've got love in our hearts first and foremost through music.
And would you say that, because as I said, I've heard this, and I'm going to try and explore it in the you know, in the interviews that I do with people, that the scene was integrated, because I never came across any, you know, apart from, you know, my experience of, you know, dealing with club bosses and club promoters and, you know, people who are on the scene. I didn't come across, you know, what I call the dark underworld. But everybody I'm talking to now says, oh my God, Steve, you don't know what was going on. And I would love part of that story again to be revealed. So anything that you can throw light on how that, the dark I'm calling it the dark underworld, but you know, other people just call it, you know, the gangsters at the time and the gangs, how they were integrated and they ran, you know, the clubs and the scene, and you know, again, this is to me a fascinating part of the story.
Well, some of the bad boys used to put down money in advance to have a club on a night. And some of the guys who used to help organise would talk to some of those money maker gangster bad boys and say, because you just put it down, you'll get your money back at the end of the night, and we'll give you interest. You never knew what interest was, but you would if somebody would put the money down, and you'd do a whole month of trying to get people there, and on the night it would be jam. But some of those gangsters would want to come in, and they would start trouble because he likes a girl over there, but she's going out with somebody over there. But, you know, it takes somebody who knew him, say, all right, yeah, don't worry, and smooth him off and take him round and back and buy him a drink or something. But they just like clubs as much as the other things. And it's been going on for time now. So the clubs that are going on in Shoreditch now still get, like, in coronavirus, the gangsters will put down some money because they're not making no money. So they give them money. Now, when it opens up, you've got to give them first dibs. Those things used to happen from those times. Say, for instance, you know, small little clubs like the one that you wanted to... You were working like a gangster, and you were working with them. You understand? My brother was just coming up. So even if you asked him to get you the club, and he was right, it did get raided, and it was getting raided every other week because they were selling stuff they wasn't supposed to sell in the porn world. You understand? It was just photographs, but you're not supposed to sell those photographs. You sell the photographs that's recommended for the shop, for the area. They want the real bad boy stuff. So they would get, you know, they never used to listen. They always used to hassle the police. So, you know, getting a club was, I think that was a good move my brother done. Strategic move there. Sam, you're going into the club world. You know, it'd have been a good look for him if that worked out. I believe, you know, it goes hand in hand, you know, and half the clubs nowadays are owned by, you know, the underworld, but you're just not gonna know that. How they look so pretty, you understand? So, you know, but for the first time, that music and say warehouse events, you know, that music made the warehouse look clean. You know what you was dancing on, you know. But I don't know, I've had some really good times with those clubs. And, you know, when it comes down to the underworld, if it wasn't for some of those gangsters putting some money down in advance, you know, we wouldn't have them. We wouldn't have some of those clubs. And West End was naughty back in the day. We don't go to West End anymore. We'd just rather go Shoreditch or Dalston or Hackney. What we're going to West End for? It's not like you go there for the bigger club, the expensive one, the experience that you're spending £70 for the whole night is an easy night. But really we're spending, if we go West End, we end up spending £120 and going home, sleeping in our bed thinking, what do that for? Just to look good. So it's to go back to basics where it was those kind of archetypal clubs that you lot were doing are the ones that are going on in Dalston now and Shoreditch now. But you have to walk and you have to go there and see them. They're exactly the same as these and they still play the same music. You understand? Now you've got your other clubs, you've got your drill, you've got your trap and you've got your thing, but the police are shutting them down. You're going to go back to the normal stuff where you can dance with a girl and absolutely be allowed to dance. You don't go out now, it's like, what's he doing? I'm dancing. Why are you making fun of me? I'm just dancing. You understand? Like, they don't dance no more. No one's dancing like they used to dance. New tune. And I believe, you know, yeah, bring it back. Even if it's once a year or once a month. See what happens. I mean, when My Soul play out, they played out at, I think it was somewhere like London Bridge on the bank or something. And when I go there, I've seen people I haven't seen for 20 years or 15 years or the last time they done something. So My Soul, if they're the archetypal of pirate radio station gone normal mainstream, they invented this stuff, you understand? And for us to have music, you know, in a time where we're going through so much privilege for other people, you know, music was the best thing that happened to us.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, but we're not going to end quite now because just before we did the interview, you did have a little rummage through your box of old photographs. And I know you've turned up some absolute gems. So would you mind? We'll just turn on the main light and we'll just put them out on the sofa. I can just zoom in and maybe, you know, any light you can throw on some of these little bits of memorabilia.
Yeah.
I think it would be absolutely fascinating.
Oh, yeah.